Hi everybody, it's been a hot minute since I made a video blog. So now that step one is over and I got my score back, I thought I would give you kind of an update about how I studied and what I used, and that is kind of all. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing that I used and my primary resource was none other than this book, which we are all very, very familiar with. I used the 2015 version when I was taking classes, and I used the 2016 version. I bought it in January when it came out to use for my step one studying. Honestly, this book is gold. There's really nothing else that I can say other than read this book. I want to say I read it almost 4 times total, because I read everything like once through while I was taking classes, and then I made a schedule before we took a test that was similar to like a Cbs Essay when I was in capstone at the end of second year. And I read through it in about a 2-week span before that, and then I read through it again in a 4-week span another time through when I was like during dedicated step prep, and then during my last 2 weeks of step prep I read through it almost all of it a 4th time total. So yeah, this book, highly recommended by me and med students everywhere when preparing for step 1. Okay, second must-have for step 1 prep, UWorld. It's hella expensive, but they are the best, so they can be hella expensive. Now, I did not buy UWorld to study during MS1 and MS2, really. I bought it in January when I knew I was going to take my test in May. So I used it for 1 block. I used it for repro. And I actually did pretty good on that final, so maybe I should have used it the whole time. But I went through UWorld 1 full time between January and May 31st. But most of that, like the majority of that, like 70% of that, was during my last 6 weeks of board prep. I went through it, I had 70-ish% left for the last 6 weeks, and I went through all of that, and then I went through all of my missed questions, which was about 1/3 of them. So yeah, and then I reset it and I started going back through questions about a week out from my exam. But honestly, I was so burnt out by that point that I didn't do a whole lot of them. I should have done more, to be honest with you. If I could do something differently, I would go back and I would try to get through UWorld twice before my exam, because I definitely got questions because they presented similarly to the UWorld questions. So my advice would be to try to get through UWorld twice. Can we just take a minute to praise Dr. Sadar for Pathoma? Because Pathoma will save your life when you are burnt out and struggling and you don't want to do any more UWorld questions and you can't stand to look at first aid anymore. These suckers, these videos at 2 times speed will be your lifesaver. I watched all of Pathoma as I was going through MS1 and 2, and then I watched all of it again during dedicated prep, and then I watched some of the videos upwards of 3 or 4 times because that's just what I needed to like get them in my head and make them stay there. So the days leading up to my exam, I actually watched Pathoma on double speed a whole lot, like a whole lot. So those were my top 3 resources. Really, I didn't deviate outside of those a whole lot. Like I said, I kind of abandoned Firecracker because they hadn't rolled out like their new dedicated step prep like option for it when I was studying. So Firecracker was too in-depth. It wasn't like enough just like high yield stuff. It was pretty good for regular classes, but I didn't think that it was helpful for dedicated step studying. One of the things that I wish that I had done before I started dedicated prepping for step 1 was listen to all of the Golion lectures. I know that they're from like 2003, but Dr. Golion is so clutch. If you can start early and go through all of his lectures and just listen to them like while you're driving or when it's late and you're like winding down for bed and you don't feel like you've done enough studying that day, listen to a Golion lecture. It's all in there, like everything is in there. He's brilliant, and he covers pretty much everything that's still really high yield. I actually didn't get through all of his lectures, but the ones that I did get through, I definitely got questions right because I listened to them. So go download those. They're lurking on the internet somewhere, and listen to them because they will save your life also for STEP and for regular classes. Honestly, they're so good. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to talk about is Picmonic, and I talk about it last because it works for some people like me, and it really doesn't work for other people like auditory learners and people like who are kinesthetic learners. But if you're a visual learner and if you can like look at something and you can rebuild that picture in your mind, then honest to goodness, Picmonic is amazing. I used it mostly for vitamin deficiencies, enzyme deficiency, so like all of the biochem enzyme deficiency or like screwed up things, that's what I used it for. Lysosomal storage diseases, glycogen storage diseases, things that I really could not make stick in my mind. I used it for bugs and drugs a lot, and I used it for leukemias and lymphomas. Those are like the main things that I used Picmonic for. I didn't need it for everything. I really just used it to hammer in those things that I knew I wasn't going to remember by reading a book or doing practice questions. Picmonic for me really filled in all of the really, really high yield gaps that I needed that I knew that I didn't have. So I honestly wish that I had kept up with it more during my first 2 years because I think it would have improved my scores then. But when it came down to crunch time, I really relied on Picmonic, and it takes some work. It takes some work to learn how to use it, how to use it efficiently. Some people need to look at the pictures 10 times. I needed to look at the pictures maybe like 4, 5, 6 times. I guess it's different for everyone, but it takes some time and it takes some effort and it takes some dedication. And they added a new feature that lets you quiz yourself over the pictures, and that was super clutch. It came out very shortly before I needed to start really prepping for step 1. And it helped me so much, and I hope that it helps you guys. I'm not being paid to say any of this. This is all just me raving about Picmonic because it's the way that I learn, and it really helped me a lot. And if you're a visual learner, I think that it can really help you a lot too. So those were pretty much all my resources. I used Pathoma, I used UWorld, and I used First Aid. And as supplementary materials, I used Picmonic and the Golion lectures. So you can see that's not a lot. I didn't let myself get bogged down looking in BRS and Costanzo physiology and step up to step 1 or whatever it is. I don't know. So really, like, I honed in what I knew was going to be high yield, and I didn't let myself really stray from that and get overwhelmed with all of the other options that are out there. Now that we've talked about resources, let's talk about schedule. So I know that I'm not a morning person. So I scheduled my test for 9 a.m. because I did not want to take it at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. and I are not friends. And now that I'm on the wards, 6 a.m. and I are not friends. 5:10 and I are not friends because that's when I have to wake up. But anyway, back to schedules. My initial plan was to wake up at like 7:30 and get ready and go to school and do my UWorld questions there. That did not happen. What I actually did was I rolled out of bed at like 8:30, 8:45 in my pajamas, went to my couch at home and did 4 blocks of UWorld questions pretty much in a row. I would stop for like snacks because snacks are important. But for the most part, I really just kind of did question block after question block after question block, 44, 44, 44, 44. And that was like before they changed it to 40. So I was still doing 44 questions. I did them all pretty much on tutor mode so that I could look at them, read them, annotate First Aid with, the material that was in UWorld. I did a lot of annotating. And it was nice because I had like my dedicated step 1 First Aid that wasn't cluttered with all of the other stuff that I needed for MS 1 and 2. But yeah, so I used UWorld on tutor mode most of the time until I went back through and did my incorrects. I did all of UWorld on tutor mode. I got to the point where I didn't feel like I had to read the entire explanation, but I definitely read the one that was right and the one that like I had narrowed it down like 50-52 or maybe like 33-33-33 too. If I really didn't understand something and I was like, whoa, where did that answer come from? Then yeah, I would go back and I would read it and I would make sure that I understood it. But a lot of people will tell you read every explanation. read most of the explanations. If you know something, then you know it. Like, you don't have to sit there and read through everything. But that's how I did UWorld. I did 4 question blocks, 9 to whatever, 1. And then I took a break at 1. I ate lunch, I got ready, and that's about when I would go to school, was in the afternoon. I would get there around 2, 2:30, 3 o'clock at the absolute latest. And I would stay until 6:30, 7:30, and that is when I would go through first aid. I will attach on the bottom a link to, I made like a full 6-week schedule of when I studied what I was going to do on what day. Knew that I needed, like, I knew I wasn't going to get through the microbiology chapter in 2 days, okay? So I gave myself 3 for that. I knew that I wasn't that great at endocrine, so I gave myself, a few days for that chapter. I gave myself 2 to 3 days for neuro, because the neuro chapter is super long. So I made like a 6-week study schedule, and I will link that below. So just, click on like the see more, and I will put that up for you guys. It's up on my blog right now. There are like links to it if you go through my FAQ and whatever, but I'll make sure there's like a direct link underneath here. But yeah, so morning UWorld, afternoon first aid, and then for the rest of the night I either watched Pathoma, or I listened to Golion, or I did Picmonic. And that was kind of my schedule, and so I usually took a break from 7 to like 9, 9:30ish. I caught up on all my shows. Whoops, sorry, I'm a bad study person. And then at like 11, I would stop. Like, when you've been studying since 9 to 11, like that's a long time, even with a few breaks in there. Like, who can do that? Like, and still maintain their sanity? Not me. So I quit. And then from like 11 to like 1 or whatever, I don't know, I'm a late night person, I stay up super late, I would watch Netflix, or I would text people, or chill on Twitter, or be on my blog talking to you guys. So yeah, that was essentially my schedule, and I did that pretty solidly for 4 weeks. And halfway through after the first 2 weeks, I took my first UWorld self-assessment. And I was like, hey, this isn't bad, this is fine, doing good. And after another week, or another 2 weeks, I took my second UWorld self-assessment. Those dates are on the calendar. I'm not sure what they are for sure, but they're on the calendar, so you can see them. So after I finished UWorld just about, I think that I took my last UWorld self-assessment, and I had made like decent strides, especially since I took that like exam during capstone. I scored over 40 points better on STEP than I did my first practice test. That was about 6 weeks before STEP. So it's totally doable. You can raise your score in, a short-ish amount of time. So, where was I going with this? Okay, so my last 2 weeks got a little like wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. So, at the end of the 4 weeks where I went over first aid for the 3rd time, I wasn't completely done with UWorld by that point. So like I kept the whole 9 to 1 UWorld question thing pretty much. And like for my afternoons, got really flexible. I kind of used the self-assessments to gauge, what am I bad at? What do I need to hammer home these last 2 weeks? What do I really, really, really need to study? Tried to avoid looking at things that like I already knew, because we all kind of like to study things that we already know, right? Because we're good at them, and we like to do things that we're good at. But this was like my time to really pinpoint, I really need to work on this area. So that's what I did. So my last 2 weeks were really flexible. I kind of just didn't have a set schedule, like I'm going to study this day, this day, and this day. It was more along the lines of, what do I feel is my weak area right now? Let me find it and just look at that today. What was I kind of in the mood to do? Because honestly, at that point, like, don't make yourself miserable. Like, you still need to look at things that you don't know. But God, you've been doing this for so long. Like, give yourself a break. You earned it. You deserve it. So I honestly, like, I kept studying hard, but I didn't pound things in as much volume during that last 2 weeks as I had before. And honestly, like, the few days, like, right before my test, I was worthless. I took my test on a Tuesday. The Friday before, I got my hair done. It's like all balayage now, whatever. Got my hair done, stayed a little bit after that. Saturday, I took a practice test. Sunday, what did I do Sunday? Okay, I went to church with my parents and then lunch, and then I studied all of the, like the back of first aid, how it has like those like high yield facts crammed in that little section. That's what I studied on Sunday. So I wanted to make sure that all those things were really fresh. And then Monday, I took Monday completely off. I got a pedicure, I went shopping, I did nothing step related the day before I took step 1, and it was so nice, and I'm so happy that I did that. Okay, let's talk about the Cbs Essay Exams, because they cost some money, but I honestly thought that they were really helpful. I did Cbs Essay 15 and 16, and I know I only did 2. A lot of people say to do like 4 or 5. I only did 2. And I did not do 18 because I've heard that 18 is really hard, and I did not need that kind of confidence destroyer right before my test. So I took 15, and I honestly, I didn't get the score that I wanted. I got like a 2, like in the low 230s. And I had scored higher than that on my UWorld self-assessment that I had taken a week or 2 earlier. And I was really disappointed with myself, because I want to match an ear, nose, and throat right now. And a 230, like low 230s, isn't very, it's possible to match. Don't get me wrong. You can match within the 230s for ear, nose, and throat if you have enough research and you interview really, really well and all that stuff. But it's a lot easier if you have, a score in the 240s. And I took 215 and I was really disappointed. And I talked to one of my classmates and they were like, yeah, we thought that 215 was kind of hard. And I was like, hey, that makes me feel better. I also paid for the assessment at the end. So I did both UWorld self-assessments. I did Cbs Essay 15, and then a week after I did Cbs Essay 15, I took 16. And I did improve significantly between 15 and 16. But I will say, guys, my step score outscored both of my Cbs Essay exams. I actually did about 2 points higher than what I scored on Cbs Essay 16. So, if you don't score great on those, don't take it too badly, I guess, because you can still improve your score, even if it's in 3 days from your test. It's totally possible. You can do it. So that's, I think that the Cbs essays are a really good gauge to figure out, where your knowledge ranks across all of the NBME knowledge that you have to have for step 1. I thought it was a pretty good gauge of what I knew. Especially 16. 16 was within 2 points of my actual score. So if I had to say, if there's a Cbs essay to kind of gauge what you think your step score might be within a 2 to 4 point, spread, try Cbs Essay 16. So that's pretty much it. That's essentially how I studied for step 1. I will link everything below from my blog so that you guys can go look at that if you want to, read what I did. And look at the calendars that I made and the 2-week cram schedule that I had for the test that I took in Capstone. What was that thing called? I don't remember. It was essentially a Cbs essay. It wasn't called that. It was, I don't know. That's not important. But I had a 2-week cram schedule for that, and then I had a 6-week schedule for dedicated step 1 studying, and I put those together, and that was 8 weeks of step prep. So I used really 2 months to study for step, and that's why I took it May 31st, was because I know myself. I know that I'm a procrastinator. If I had taken it later, I wouldn't have studied as hard, as early as I did. So, to thine own self be true, and know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. If you procrastinate and you know that, maybe try to take step a little bit earlier than you think you need to, than what everyone else would tell you to do, because you're gonna get your butt in gear. And that's what I did. And I talked to multiple people about it, and I was like, I know me, I know how I study. I studied for the MCAT for a week. I crammed for the MCAT. And so I didn't want to give myself a full 3 months to study for step because I wasn't gonna use it very well. So you do you. Ignore the haters, and go kill step, y'all. I believe in you.